Hello, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown, and I want to send out first a message to the family of Sean Daugherty. I know they're looking for a second opinion on the case of what happened to their son. Uh, I am willing to do that pro bono if the family has full access to autopsy, police report, all the police reports, interviews, etc. I'm willing to take a look at the case, and I also want to send out a message to the police if they have not released this information to the family but would like to have me come in as a second opinion. I'd be willing to come down to location because I live in the DC area, so it's not that far from me. Also pro bono. Now, having said that, I also want to send out a message to the community because recently the police had a video that upset a great many people because they were trying to, in their mind, set the record straight because there's a large community of people, Facebook, YouTube, change.org with petitions to get a second opinion on this case, to get further investigation on this case. And people are enraged at the police because they believe that the police determined that Sean died of suicide too quickly and that there's a tremendous amount of information that points to this not being a suicide, this being a homicide. And from the comments I've read, 99% of the people commenting believe it was not a suicide. And so this has kind of gone like wildfire across the internet. And somebody just let me know about this because they know I've worked on cases like this before. And so first I'd like to say to the community, all those internet folks, YouTubers who are taking information only from essentially one side, which is the family side. I'm not saying they're wrong, but this from one side, they haven't seen the autopsy, they haven't seen all the police reports, and they're essentially giving the same information out, but with horrified commentary, like, how could this be? I can't believe this. There's red flags everywhere. And these people that are doing this are not investigators. They're not criminal profilers. They're not detectives. So they're really not familiar with this kind of thing. All right, now let me stop right here and explain to you before I'm going to do a short analysis of this case, what I see from the outside. And I want the family and the police to be able to see what I have to say because I want them to understand how I analyze and where I'm coming from. I have worked on cases that police have ruled suicides before. And here's two examples. Example one, a family came to me and said, the police have ruled this a suicide and there's just no way possible. I analyzed the case. I agreed with the police and the family became very, very angry with me and they went out to find yet more experts to prove their son was murdered. This quite often happens because the majority of cases that the police rule suicide are actually suicides, and families have a hard time accepting this. The next thing is the second case. Police did rule it a suicide. It looked that way. Family brought me in. I worked with a couple other people, and we believed it was a homicide. Turned out we were right. The suspect was charged and convicted in that case, but there were some unusual things there that did set up some red flags. Now, as I said, the majority of cases that are labeled as suicide by the police and the medical examiner are exactly that. Now, is that true in this case? All right, what I'm going to do is go through the basics that I know and tell you where I stand at this point. All right, if you don't know the case, Sean Daugherty, age 12. I'm taking this from the Facebook page, by the way, that is called What Happened to Sean. Sean Daugherty, 12 years old, passed away unexpectedly on, April. Sorry, I have trouble with my numbers there. April 14th, 2022, at his home in Yorktown, Virginia, under suspicious circumstances. The local police have failed to investigate. And of course, they say they have investigated, but the family believes they have not properly investigated. They have failed to investigate and have dismissed our concerns. So this is where all this stuff is happening now, where people are demanding that more should be done, and that there should be more investigation, and there should be more opinions, more analysis done by theoretically professionals. All right, now I'm going to go to this day and just give you the basics. And this is coming from the family's point of view, from the website. Apparently, Sean arrived home a little after 3 o'clock. And then and very shortly after that, he was alone with his little toddler brother, who I believe is 2 years old. There's a lot of information here. I'm not going to read all the way through this. About 3:30 was the last time anybody had contact with him. And that was his mother who talked to him, and he had put up some homework, I guess, through the internet. There was supposedly gotten a peach out for himself to eat, and he was going to set up some hanging out upstairs with his little brother while he played games, and his little brother did something on an iPad. All right, that was at 3:30. Now, the older sister, Maria, now she arrives home or at the house. Can't quite figure out if she actually lives there or she lives someplace else. She's a college student. I can't quite figure that out here because she didn't have a key. So, and I say there's a lot more information. I'm not going to go through it all, but she arrives somewhere near 5 o'clock. All right, Maria, Sean's older sister, had been at a tennis match after school. All right, when she got home, the front door was locked. She rang the bell and knocked, and no one answered. Where was Sean? He was supposed to be home. She called her mother, Ramona, who told her to call Sean and advised that he was probably gaming upstairs. Maria was frustrated. She was in a rush. She called Sean twice and texted 3 times at 4:50 p.m. Okay, so now we have, we know that he was alive at 3:30. He was not alive when she got home. So that's about an hour and 20 minutes of possible time of something happening. But there was no response. She decided to run around back to try and enter through the back door, and that's when she saw him. And she saw him here, hanging from the swing set. She froze at that moment, entering a state of shock. A person was hanging from their swing set unnaturally with a bag over their head. And this is one of the things people find very unusual, that he had a bag over his head. And a lot of people think that if you're committing suicide, that's not something you're going to do. That looks more like a homicide. They have a point there that is somewhat unusual. She looked around trying to figure out if she could get into the house before this stranger got to her. So she just was freaking out at this point. She got very confused. And then she realized that it was actually her brother. Hysterical, she ran up to her brother and confirmed it was him by looking closely at his hands, which were bound to his waist by a belt, discolored from lack of circulation. Now, I want to point out something here. Because I don't have the reports, I don't know how accurate her description is. When you're in a panic, you see your little brother hanging and his hands through a belt. I don't know that you know what discolored is. Maybe she did, but maybe she didn't. Also, he had been hanging a while. So I'm going to say hanging a while. We don't know that he was hanging a while. It could have been 5 minutes before she arrived, but it also could be an hour or more before she arrived, in which case the blood would go down to that location and there would be discoloration. So she may be accurate on that. I just don't know. Okay. Screaming, she lifted her brother with one arm in hopes of releasing the pressure from his head and called 911 with the other hand. She called at 4:54 p.m. Give her credit on that. That was that was pretty amazing for her to be able to do under those circumstances. She removed him from his hanging position by simply lifting the shoelace type string over his head with 3 fingers and brought him down to the ground and performed CPR for 6 minutes with the assistance of the 911 dispatcher until the EMTs took over. Again, great work on the sister's part. That's tough to do under those circumstances. And she did everything right. She got the ligature off his neck. She put him on the ground. She tried to save his life. Sean was dressed in men's clothing, and this is a part that is very confusing to people because apparently they were his stepfather's clothing, and also his underwear supposedly in his stepfather's bedroom. So that's weird, okay? Undoubtedly weird. Let's say, and his arms so tightly bound to his waist, the EMTs made note of how difficult it had been to remove it. Now, here again, it depends on the circumstances of how long you've been hanging there, whether any kind of rigor mortis had set in, and what the EMTs were doing. Somebody might have made a comment, and we don't know how accurate the comment was. So again, we have to take some of these things with just saying we don't know, absolutely, unless I have confirmation from someplace else. because one of the issues is how tightly was this belt around his hands? In other words, could he have done it himself, or would somebody else have to do that to him? This is another thing that people find suspicious. All right. So they had to unbuckle it and move it so they could administer shocks with an AED. He had a bag over his head and his glasses were broken and found in the vicinity. His eyesight was so poor he couldn't see without his glasses. How could this clumsy 12-year-old suspend himself in such an awkward position with a bag on his head while his hands were belted so tightly to his waist without being able to see? And those are questions a family would have. He was suspended by his chin, not his neck. At any point, he could have stood up and saved himself, but he did not. His feet were dragging on the ground and his bent knees were mere inches from the ground as well. Okay, and it says, in fact, normal hanging injuries weren't present. All right, let me stop right here. This is what I call a soft hanging. People think that when somebody hangs themselves, they must jump off of a tree, like hang off of a tree, jump off of a ladder, jump off of a chair, and do a judicial hanging where they jump into the air and then come down. And then, sometimes there's a fracture of the hyoid bone, and they're hanging in the air. But that's a very hard to say it this way, but an uncomfortable way to do it. So there is another way which people use, which is simply to put a ligature around your neck where it presses here. And what you do is you just bend your knees and it stops the blood flow to your brain. And at a certain point, you just kind of pass out. And when you pass out, your knees are bent and it looks like you could stand up, but you're unconscious, so you can't stand up. So the problem is then time goes on and the brain doesn't get any blood. So then you die. That's the way it works. This is also used in autoerotic sex, that kind of thing too, where you put that around your neck and you bend your knees so that you can get less oxygen to your brain, and that is exciting and pleasurable. But if you wait too long, you pass out, and if you pass out, then you can't stand back up. So that it is very possible to hang yourself in that position. So that is not unusual, but many people think it is. And therefore, it says, in fact, normal hanging injuries weren't present. Well, I'm guessing they may be talking about the fractured hyoid bone, which it wouldn't, because he's not jumping off of anything and it's not tightly encircled like that. It's just pressing where it presses so you don't get the blood going back to the brain. All right. It looked like he'd been killed somewhere else and propped ornamentally outside, displayed in men's clothing and suspended like a doll. His knees were so close to the ground you could see the bottom of his feet, and they were clean. How could perfectly clean feet, his feet be perfectly clean if he'd walked barefoot from the home to the swing through a swampy spring yard? Now, the police say it wasn't swampy, it was dry. So I don't know again. It was April and the whole yard was mud and dust. All right. Now, let me stop right here. Here is the major problem with this. Their claim is that the bag over his head came from from the garage, from one of the stepfathers. I think there was like a helmet in it, and there was a bag that went around the helmet. There were some things that supposedly they were going to get rid of. There were two bags like this, and the ties, the hanging material came from those two bags. And so the family believes that somebody in a rush, because there were other things in that garage which would be better for hanging, like thick ropes. But they're not, that's not a necessity in this kind of if you're trying to commit suicide in this way. But yes, could somebody have gone in there and gotten those and gotten the bag and everything? Sure. Here's the problem. As far as I know, the autopsy having been done, as far as I know, there were no signs of injury to Sean. In other words, there were no defense wounds. There's no bruises on his body. It doesn't look like he had been restrained. It doesn't look like he had been beaten. And so now you have a case where he talks to his mom, 3:30, and somehow, for reasons totally unknown, because there's nobody older than him in that house. It's just a little brother. So we're not talking about one of those cases where you got some, maybe a stepfather, or maybe an older brother, or maybe some teenagers in the house that are hanging out, or a renter or something, where he was alone with some older person who may have control over him. Somebody would have had to come to his house, and there would have, I'm sure there's video somewhere in the neighborhood. Somebody would have had to come to his house, get into the house, and knock on the door, say, "Hi, Sean," somehow get into the house. And then once I got into the house, they would have to, for reasons of motive totally unknown, decide they're going to kill this young boy for whatever reason. And they're going to have to get him to cooperate in some way. Well, that's pretty darn hard without restraining, without attacking, without doing something to him, using drugs on him, something, hitting him over the head. There's not a sign of any, as far as I know, any kind of anything in his system that would show that he was, that he had been given something, so he was unconscious. There's no sign that he was hurt in any way. So how did somebody, or even two people, control him in such a way? And if he died of asphyxiation from the hanging issue, they didn't strangle him then, because strangulation looks totally different. You put a ligature around the neck and you strangle like this, and you have a ligature mark straight around the neck. And then if you go hang somebody, when the police come, they go, wait a minute, that doesn't look right. How come the ligature goes like this? That's wrong. That looks like a homicide. But apparently that doesn't exist. So he wasn't strangled by anybody. So what did they do to him? And then how to then take him out and hang him or kill him in some way that doesn't seem to exist, and then go prop him up for no reason whatsoever. And the other interesting thing is he's wearing his stepfather's clothing. I can see no good reason why anybody killing him would find it made any sense to take his clothes off and put his stepfather's clothes on him. Why? Why would that even be done? It makes no sense. And one may say, why would Sean do that himself? I don't know, because I don't know the family dynamics. Is it possible, if he were severely depressed and angry and frustrated, for whatever reasons, because I don't know what's going on in the family. They may be the most wonderful family in the world, and he had no good reason that anybody can think of. But did he have a contentious relationship with his stepfather? Was he not willing? They were about to move again. Did he not want to move? Was he being bullied at school? What was he obsessed with dying? Because some kids are. What's on his cell phone? What searches has he done on the internet? Is he into anything that's questionable? Now the family says absolutely not. Family may be right. I don't know. Absolutely not. He's a happy child. He was in the best mood. He just came back from a Disney cruise. He's super happy, and he wouldn't have done this to himself. And what the police are saying to the family as well, that's what you think. But an awful lot of kids and adults look like they're perfectly fine 30 minutes before they commit suicide. And this is true. So it looks like he himself put his stepfather's clothes on, that he himself went outside and did this to himself, because there's no evidence of any other human being in that house outside his little brother. There's no motive that we know of. There's no sign that anybody assaulted him or held him captive, did something to him, and then put him out there. None of these things exist. So where I'm sitting right now, I would say the police appear to be correct that this is a suicide. Weird as some of those things are, and believe me, people do weird things. And like the belt issue, sometimes what happens is a person who decides to kill themselves wants to be sure that they're not just going to immediately grab their neck and then stand back up again. So they tie their hands. So they say, okay, I'm going to bend my knees. And when that does that, I won't be able to, even though he could push up, he won't be able to grab the thing around his neck. A lot of people don't even know how to do this quote properly. So they're going by whatever they've read someplace or whatever they theorize. And it's hard to say. It really is. And why would you put a bag over your head? I don't know. Maybe because you didn't want to see the world in front of you when you did it. Maybe you were angry, super angry, and you wanted people to find you in that condition. But I don't know, because I don't know what's going on in the family. And from the outside, it all looks like the family is a super happy family. But I don't know this. So I can't say. I can't say that there's a super happy kid. I don't know. So the police are in the same situation. When they do their investigation, the first thing they're going to try to do is determine how he died. And according to them, he died. It was a suicide, because they had no evidence of anybody else being there and anybody else doing anything to him. So I don't know what else they have to lead them to believe there's some kind of behavioral evidence or internet evidence to support that he was unhappy and was thinking about suicide, or that there were family issues. I don't know what else they have. So I'm only seeing the family side of it. And yes, he looked like he was a happy kid. And I see why the family would say, well, I don't see why he killed himself if he did. And I don't believe he did, they say. I believe it's just makes no sense. Well, that's where I stand. I see no evidence of this being a murder. I see that so far the evidence supports this as a suicide. However, I am willing, with the family's request, to review everything and see if there's something I don't know because the police haven't released it. And I would say, oh, if I'd only known that, I would agree. Same thing for the police. If you'd like me to come in and give a second opinion on this, and I can actually see all the materials, I'd be willing to do that too. But the one thing I want to leave before with just everybody out there in the internet world, there's so many people out there just get incredibly angry, and they're just going crazy in the internet world because people think they can solve the crime, because people think they understand that this is what this is, and they say it's a murder, and how dare the police do these terrible things and not investigate properly. And while I do believe in police oversight, I don't think this is necessarily the way to do it, is to have a lot of gossip and unsupported theories going all over the internet. I think it gets a little out of hand. So I would just hope everybody tones down a wee bit. But my offer stands to the family and to the police, because, I think the family believes that they haven't had enough help, and the police feel that the family is saying things about them that aren't true and ruining their reputation. So, both sides, unfortunately, they should be the same side, but each side thinks that they're not being treated fairly. And I'd be happy to come in and do an analysis and see if I could be of help. But the reason I came forth today is because I want people to understand that I don't hide behind what is popular, or just want to jump on what is popular. For example, just to get hits on the internet, get more subscribers and all that. That's not why I do things. I do things because I like the truth, and I like people to understand what evidence shows and how things actually work, because this is an educational channel. I rarely do pro bono cases like this, but I would be willing in this instance, because I think it's just there's just so much out there that people are just going crazy over, not because I believe they're not understanding what they're seeing. Now, again, I understand people might think, well, I'd like this to be examined a little further. I get that. But so far, just to be straight up and open, so far, I see this as a suicide. And I'm willing to change my mind if there's evidence to support changing my mind. So anyway, that's it. If you've never been to the channel before, please do like, please do subscribe, please do share, and check my other cases in the playlists, and see what you have to say. But I just want to say in the comments below, please do not come here and throw a whole bunch of stuff at me and say, how dare you, and don't you realize this, and don't you realize that. I'll just simply remove those comments, because I don't want a huge firestorm on this particular channel over this case. I'm just here to help people understand and here to offer my assistance. And so that is it. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.